the lunch, so we'll try to keep it short and sweet. Thank you for your patience. This is a duologue, so we wanted to present two perspectives about value, an external market-facing perspective, which I will talk about, and then as a technology leader looking into the organization, how are we talking about value, where should we focus when we talk about AI delivering value. Vijay, over to you. Your perspectives, please.
Thanks, Srinath. Let me start with a quick question. What is the most valuable asset in an enterprise? Human mind? Okay. Fine. People, right? So I'll put it with people. People are the most valuable asset in an organization. But if you see the balance sheet, people won't appear as an asset in the balance sheet. We always consider them as expense cost in the income statement, right? Which tells us an important thing, that what we measure is not always what creates value. There is an important fundamental change that is happening in the last 50 years. If you look at this diagram, earlier, 50 years ago, only 17% of the organizational value is intangible. Today, more than 90% of the organizational value is intangible. That's the change that we have seen in the last 50 years. So now the important question is that how do you create this value? Let's look at what most companies are doing. Most companies are still trying to add more people to generate additional revenue. There are few organizations who are using technology in the best possible way to break that linear relationship and able to create some non-linear growth. But what the leaders are doing is fundamentally different. They are creating the platforms and they are integrating into the ecosystem and creating a feedback loop so that we can create a sustainable competitive advantage. That's how they are creating a compounding value over a period of time. So we understood creating value is important, but there is an important nuance here. Value creation is not always possible to capture. So let's understand why, right? So most of the companies are again trying to invest a lot to increase the productivity, right? So they are trying to bring in technology, AI to improve the productivity. You are seeing some gains in productivity, but these gains spread thinly across the employees. Until unless we are able to combine these efforts and redeploy these efforts somewhere else and trying to create a value, then you are not able to gain a much improvement in the margins. Over a period of time, what happens? Then everybody starts improving the productivity and it becomes like a commodity, and that point of time, the value won't be present with you. You need to pass on that value to the market or to the customers over a period of time. So that's where the leaders are doing fundamentally different. Like the way I mentioned, they are creating platforms and they are in continuous innovation to keep up the momentum. That's how they are able to create a sustainable competitive advantage. So the important message here is that value creation, though we are creating the value, it's not always possible for you to capture that value until unless you come up with a business model to be a competitive advantage. So now look at how can you create a competitive advantage. So what is enabling those leaders to create a competitive advantage? So innovation is the driving factor in all those companies which are able to create a market value. So when you look at the innovation portfolio, everybody says that innovation means whatever you are trying to do something new is called as innovation, but not exact. You need to have broadly two types of use cases in your innovation portfolio, which I am calling them as a best in class or first in class. When you talk about best in class, you are already doing very well in your business. How do you improve your products over a period of time? That's where you try to continuously innovate to improve the product. The first in class, there is a problem in the market, you don't have a solution yet. How are you going to take advantage of these technologies and try to solve the problem and gain that first mover advantage? So the most important thing is that having identified the innovation initiatives in our innovation portfolio, you don't want to put everything in one lane, right? There needs to be different lanes here, and you need to create a hypothesis for our innovation initiatives. Things that fail the hypothesis, you need to put them in the exit lane first. Things that have shown some initial signals, So you need to bring them at the fast leg so that you can launch early to the market, and things that require some change, you need to pivot those ideas very quickly. More importantly, your innovation portfolio needs to have a good governance mechanism. So what I would recommend strongly is that you need to have a weekly governance where you look at the hypothesis of every innovation initiative and see whether you need to pivot that idea or you need to prune that idea. More importantly, on a monthly basis, you need to redistribute your people in an innovation portfolio to focus on the high value initiatives. And the last important thing is that you have a limited budget, right? So you need to be doing the frugal innovation. So you need to do the capital reallocation on a quarterly basis to see that how can you build your innovation portfolio and launch the products quickly to the market. So now, understanding that how do you create the value and how do you capture that value and what is driving to create that value, let's look at what kind of metrics you can build to measure that value. Over to you, Srinath.
Thank you, Vijay. So, doing the recap. So, Vijay, the concept of value he was talking about is how you would explain to a boardroom, to the CXOs, and hence, by way of that, the world outside. How are you identifying value and how are you going to explain value, right? But then I would like to wear the cap of a technology leader, someone who is responsible to drive teams to deliver value through using AI, right? What sort of a context that person has to set, and how does that person explain value, and what metrics that person should focus on is what I'll talk about. I'll set up some context, right? And this is a context we are all in a way aware of. We use the term digital transformation. It is something we've been witnessing for a long time. It's an ongoing process with the new trend being AI. And when we talk about value, when we talk about our focus in digital transformation, if I had asked this question a couple of years ago, people would typically talk about efficiency, right? All the efforts were to find ways to streamline an existing business process, right? Or how do we find ways to reduce manual tasks and automate as much as possible? Or people would talk about, can I run certain tasks at scale, repetitively, the same output? So people were focused on, or we technology leaders were focused on execution efficiency, optimizing execution. That was the focus area. With AI in the mix, the biggest benefit all of us are getting is the cognitive support, right? So by way of that, our focus should ideally shift to finding ways to measure or define value by way of their decision effectiveness, right? We have to look at things like, is AI helping us focus on deciding correctly, right? Is it augmenting the human thinking process? And by way of augmenting human thinking process, is it helping us identify not just what to look at, but what to act upon? Right? Is it augmenting our decision-making process? And by way of that, has it been able to help us work on the right actions and hence see outcomes? And finally, these right actions aided by AI will lead to business outcomes, right? You see impact. So in summary, when we talk about value, when we talk about metrics, we should change our thought process from one of execution efficiency to decision effectiveness, right? We'll move to the next slide where I would like to present a simple framework that we could probably keep in mind, something that will help us understand where we can generate the best value, by when we use AI. For starts, right, we should not look at AI as a siloed capability. I know you would have heard the same concept again and again, but it's extremely important that when you look at AI, you don't look at it as a separate siloed capability, but you look at it as a way of augmenting an existing workflow, right? So your first checkpoint is, are you embedding AI into an existing workflow? Are you embedding it in a place where there is action already being done by a particular role? The second one is adoption. Now that you are embedding AI at the place of action, have you been able to encourage and nudge people in those roles to actually use that AI to decide upon the next actions, to act upon the insights, right? These first two, what I talk about is measuring enablement. A very good analogy is how the UPI payment system, we all have become so familiar and proficient in the UPI ecosystem. It touches upon these two, right? It has been nicely embedded into every part of our life. That's what I talk about workflow integration. You go to the tea stall on the road, you go to the supermarket, you go anywhere, you are using UPI. And second part is adoption, right? Everyone is using UPI. Either by way of force or way of interest, people have now very nicely adopted UPI. So it's important to focus on these measures from enablement perspective, and then come the next two measures or areas, which is decision velocity. Is it adding speed to my decision making, right? Not just giving me an option to work on, but I'm able to act on it faster and helping me with key business decisions. And finally, I'm able to measure value based on that, right? I'll talk about some quick metrics, right? When we talk about workflow integration, I come from supporting sales and marketing teams using technology. If I were to really implement AI, I would look at how that capability is embedded into the CRM system. Not as a capability as a siloed agent sitting outside, but is it available for my sales team at the point of action in CRM, right? Or another measure is, are you reducing the number of context switches, right? You should reduce the number of steps someone has to take to reach that particular decision, to reach that particular recommendation. When you talk about adoption, it's not simply how well people are using particular AI capability you provide, but it's also about whether those recommendations are being accepted. If you don't have that input, you're not going to know whether it is being effective in the decision-making process. And finally, when you talk about decision velocity, you talk about, have you reduced the time for decision making, right? And I'll also talk about an example which will probably help you understand this better. And finally, when I talk about business impact, people always talk about revenue, which are good metrics, but sometimes when you implement technology, these are far away from implementing the technology, right? So you should focus on certain lead metrics, some intermediate metrics that will finally have a positive impact on the lag metrics such as revenue. So these are the four areas and some example metrics. I'll go to quick example. Like I said, I work in technology enablement of sales teams. It's all about dashboards that we provide to sales teams. It's a world where typically we have seen amazing dashboards, a lot of descriptive insights, but they lie outside the place of action, which is usually the CRM, right? So it's a scenario of insight without direction, that you leave the insights there, but you leave it for the subjective judgment of the person, the role, the sales rep in question. With AI, you talked about being able to enable action without ambiguity. You're going to have systems provide the recommendation on the next best action, and which also drives consistent outcomes for the sales teams. Essentially, in today's world, when you talk about such decision supporting dashboards, insights, you talk about lag being present from the time the data is available and a person trying to make sense out of the data and finally taking an action, right? With AI, what we should measure is, have we been able to enable a real-time decision making in a consistent fashion, and one that becomes dependable for the sales teams to repeat on and on again, right? So these are the metrics that should be measured. Essentially, you have to see whether you have moved from delayed, inconsistent, effort-driven decisions to real-time, consistent, workflow-embedded decisions. Back to Vijay to cover any other examples he has.
Thanks, Srinath. So let's move on the same point at what Srinath has touched upon, right? So now when you look at the value, so at what stage the value is actually created, right? So we look at the business opportunity, the problem that we are trying to pursue. You build a product, solution, and you are launching it, and you are onboarding the users. That's where the adoption is really important. That we are trying to build the first-in-class solutions, or trying to improve the solution in the best-in-class, like the way I pointed out in the previous slide. That's where you see the competitive advantage, right? You can able to see that lag metrics of realizing the business well. And more importantly, that you need to have the feedback to continuously get the information back to your system, and you should be able to improve your system over a period of time, right? Slowly you improve and you launch to the more user, that's when you gain the additional value from your product. Over a period of time, you are going to maximize the value that you can extract from the solution. What is more important here is that this is not a quick path that you can follow to achieve the value. It takes a significant effort and timeline to build a product and launch and get the maximum value out of it. So in one of our use cases that we worked upon, it took us almost 6 months after building the solution to launch it to the larger global audience so that we can gain the maximum value out of the product. And it's not a end yet, right? So this value creation is a continuous game. We are trying to invent and improve the solution over a period of time. More importantly, many times we only talk about what is the effort required to build the product, right? So there is a 3x more effort required to bring the change management so that you can see the maximum value. And to end with it, so far we talked about the process and product, but what is more important, the people, right? So people are the key pillars behind in developing these solutions. So what is important here is that how do you build the right culture to build this kind of innovative solutions, right? So we all know that people behave the way that how you measure them, right? One of the things that I'm hearing so frequently in recent days is that people are talking about, when they talk about AI adoption, they are talking about how many tokens are you consuming. Is that the right metric to measure? What happened in the start of the year, every company, they said that all my people are starting using the LLMs, we are counting the number of tokens that they have used. Now they realize that the entire budget for the year was consumed just in one quarter. So that's not the right metric, right? So you need to look at that, what value we are producing by consuming those tokens. So that's an important thing. Another important aspect when we talk about innovation, right? Innovation will also have the failures. So if you are only trying to reward the teams who are succeeding in the innovation, people will be afraid to take the risk, right? So you need to find a way that how you are defining your reward system. Are there any learnings from the failed experiment that you are sharing within the organizations and helping us to improve a better product? If you are rewarding those teams, innovation will grow. And more importantly, many times when you define a reward structure, you define a metric and you try to measure that metric. If you have a single metric, people will find a way to gamify the metric, right? And this is one of the examples that I did. Many of you know that in Agile, one of the key metrics people used to capture is the velocity. But what I used to do for my programs is that not only the velocity, we also used to measure the technical depth and more importantly the team happiness index. So when you're trying to measure a combination of metrics and see that how they're helping you to achieve the goal, that's when you can define the right culture in our team, which will help you to build a great innovation and launch the products quickly to the market and gain a competitive.
Thank you so much.